Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1889. Mei Lin Zhao arrived in Silver Creek carrying everything she still considered hers in one worn brown suitcase. There were 2 dresses, a winter shawl too thin for Wyoming, a small iron wok wrapped in cloth, a kitchen knife with a handle polished smooth from years of use, and a fabric-covered notebook she guarded more carefully than the money sewn into the lining of her coat. The notebook had belonged to her mother. Its pages contained recipes written over many years in cramped Chinese characters. Some were stained with oil. Others bore pale rings from bowls set down before the ink had dried. Measurements were inconsistent because her mother had never needed exact instructions. A handful. Half a bowl. Enough ginger until it smells right. Cook until the meat gives up. To anyone else, the book might have looked incomplete. To Mei, it contained a home. Her mother had died before Mei left China. By the time Mei reached California, the notebook was the closest thing she had to hearing her voice again. San Francisco had taught Mei how little sentiment mattered when rent came due. She worked wherever she could, washing dishes, preparing vegetables, cleaning tables, occasionally cooking when someone trusted her enough to stand near a stove. She learned English one transaction at a time. Beef. Flour. Rent. Tomorrow. Too expensive. No credit. Then she began hearing stories about railroad towns farther east. Places crowded with laborers, ranch hands, freight drivers, miners, and travelers. Men who worked long days needed meals. Mei knew how to cook. The arithmetic seemed simple. Reality was not. Silver Creek had one hotel dining room, a boarding house kitchen, a bakery, and several establishments where a man could buy whiskey much more easily than vegetables. Mei visited every place that had a stove. The hotel manager looked at her wok and shook his head. "We already have a cook. I rent kitchen after dinner." "No." The boarding house owner was kinder. "My stove runs from 4 in the morning until nearly 10 at night. I couldn't give you enough time to make it worthwhile." At the bakery, Mei offered cash. The baker refused anyway. Finally, a merchant leaned against his counter and explained what he apparently considered the central flaw in her plan. "People around here eat beef and potatoes." Mei looked at him. "I can cook beef." He glanced at the wok tucked beneath her arm. "Not like that." She left without arguing. By sunset, Silver Creek seemed to have plenty of hungry people and no room for her to feed them. Mei rented the cheapest room she could find above a feed store. That night she sat on the edge of the bed with her mother's notebook open across her knees. She counted her remaining money. 2 silver dollars and several coins. Not enough to rent a storefront. Not enough to purchase a stove. Certainly not enough to survive for long while waiting for Silver Creek to become curious about Chinese food. Mei turned through the familiar pages. Dumplings. Noodles. Braised pork. Ginger broth. Rice porridge. Pickled vegetables. Simple dishes her mother had made when money was scarce and everyone still needed to eat. Mei touched one stained corner of the paper. "I have the recipes," she whispered in Chinese. Then she looked around the empty room. "I just don't have a kitchen." The following morning, Mei borrowed a covered pot from the boarding house in exchange for repairing 2 torn aprons. She bought a small amount of flour, onion, and beef. Rice was too expensive. Pork was inconsistent. So she adapted. She mixed flour dough by hand, chopped the beef finely, added onion and ginger, then steamed 7 buns in the borrowed pot. 7. That was all she could afford to risk. She carried them in a cloth-lined basket to the railroad depot. A freight train had arrived shortly before noon. Workers moved crates along the platform while teamsters shouted at horses. Passengers stepped around puddles left by melting snow. Mei stood near the edge of the activity and lifted the cloth. Steam escaped. A few people looked. Nobody bought. One man asked what was inside. Beef. He stared at the bun. Where? Inside. He laughed and walked away. Mei waited. By mid-afternoon, she had sold nothing. Then a tall cowboy crossed the street. She had noticed him earlier at the livery. Mid-30s, broad shoulders. Dark hair beneath a battered brown hat, short beard, and the particular tired posture of someone who spent more time on horseback than in chairs. He stopped. What's that smell? Mei lifted the cloth. Food. That's helpful. Beef bun. He pointed. 1. Mei named the price. He paid without bargaining. The cowboy bit into the bun. Mei watched him chew. He said nothing. She waited. He took another bite. Bad? She finally asked. He looked at her. No. Then why no talk? My mouth's full. Mei decided this was reasonable. He finished the bun. How many left? 6. I'll take 3. Mei narrowed her eyes. Why? The cowboy appeared genuinely confused. Because I'm still hungry. She handed him 3. He paid. My name's Caleb Morgan. Mei Lin Zhao. He repeated it carefully. Mei Lin. Mei. Mei. Better. Caleb tipped his hat and walked away carrying 3 steamed buns. Mei looked at the coins in her palm. They were the first dollars she had earned in Wyoming. She sold 2 more before evening. She ate the last one herself. It wasn't a successful business. But it was proof that the merchant had been wrong. People in Silver Creek would eat something besides potatoes. They simply needed a reason to try it. Caleb found her the next morning. You looking for a kitchen? Mei stiffened. Who told you? Mrs. Palmer at the boarding house. I asked many people. She mentioned that too. Mei waited. I've got one. What kind? Old. How old? Caleb considered. Depends how generous you're feeling. I am not generous. Then very old. He led her 3 blocks down Main Street. They stopped in front of a weathered building with faded swinging doors. Mei looked from the building to Caleb. This is Saloon. Was. You own Saloon? Unfortunately. Inside, dust covered nearly everything. Tables stood upside down. A long wooden bar stretched across one wall. Several stools had broken legs. A cracked mirror reflected the abandoned room. An upright piano sat in the corner missing enough keys to make music unlikely. Mei walked through without speaking. Then Caleb opened a door behind the bar. The kitchen changed everything. It was neglected but substantial. A cast-iron stove occupied one wall. There was a stone sink, a hand pump connected to a well, a heavy preparation table, shelves, hooks, a pantry, and a brick chimney. Mei touched the stove. When used last? Almost 2 years. Chimney. Needs cleaning. Pump. Works. Roof leak. Only when it rains. Mei looked up. Caleb added, mostly. She turned toward him. Why empty? The humor disappeared from his face. My brother owned it. Mei waited. He died 2 years ago. I'm sorry. Caleb nodded once. I kept thinking I'd decide what to do with the place. And? Apparently my decision was to let Dust own it. Mei looked around again. Rent? Cook dinner for my ranch hands twice a week. No. Caleb blinked. No. Too cheap. You're negotiating against yourself. If rent too cheap, then someday you say I owe you. I wouldn't. I don't know that. Caleb studied her. There was no anger in her voice. Only experience. All right. 3 months at low rent. Enough for you to get started. After that, if you're making money, we set a regular price. Written. Repairs. We list them. Who pays? Depends on what it is. Written. Caleb smiled slightly. You really do trust nobody. Mei shook her head. I trust paper. By afternoon, they had an agreement. Business first. Nothing owed except what the contract said. Mei preferred it that way. The old saloon took 8 days to become usable. Caleb repaired 2 tables and replaced a section of damaged chimney pipe. Mei scrubbed everything else. When he bought lumber, she made him write down the cost. When he spent half a day repairing shelves, she insisted his labor be recorded too. You don't have the money to pay me yet, he reminded her. Then account. You plan on paying for every nail? Yes. Every board? Yes. What if I sweep the floor? Mei handed him a broom. That one free. Caleb laughed. The kitchen was the easier problem. The menu was harder. Mei quickly discovered that trying to reproduce her mother's cooking exactly would bankrupt her. Rice had to travel too far. Several vegetables she knew were unavailable. Certain sauces were difficult to obtain outside Chinese communities. Even familiar spices cost more than she could justify. At first, this frightened her. Changing the recipes felt dangerously close to losing them. Then she remembered something her mother had said during a year when flooding made food scarce. A recipe is not a prison. Feed the family with what the season gives you. Mei began experimenting. Wyoming had excellent beef. So pork braised with ginger became beef cooked slowly with onion and a small amount of spice. Local wheat became noodles. Dumplings received cabbage, beef, and onion. Carrots and cabbage could be preserved. Bones became broth. Nothing useful was wasted. The dishes weren't copies of meals from China. They were something new. Chinese methods working with Wyoming ingredients. Opening day arrived. For the first hour, nobody came. Then 2 men entered, looked around, asked if whiskey was still served, and left when Mei said no. Another customer inspected the menu she had explained verbally. Noodles? Yes. With beef? Yes. What are noodles? Flour. Like bread? No. Like dumplings? No. He thought about this. Potatoes? No. He left. Mei leaned both hands on the counter. Caleb entered 10 minutes later. Busy? She looked at the empty room. What do you think? I think I should choose my words carefully. He sat. Feed me. Mei placed a bowl of hand-cut noodles and braised beef before him. A ranch hand passing the open door stopped. What's that? Caleb answered without looking up. Food. What's in it? Beef. Anything strange? Caleb glanced at Mei. Her eyebrow rose. Onions, he said. The ranch hand came inside. Then another. By the end of the evening, Mei had served 11 meals. Not enough to celebrate. Enough to open again tomorrow. The breakthrough came 4 days later. A railroad maintenance crew stopped in Silver Creek. Several Chinese workers walked past the former saloon. One stopped. He smelled ginger. Then he heard Mei speaking to herself in Chinese while carrying a pot. He stepped inside. Their dialects were not identical, but close enough. The man's entire expression changed. You're Chinese? Mei smiled. Yes. You're cooking. Trying to. He laughed. Within 20 minutes, 6 workers occupied one table. Mei brought noodles, broth, cabbage, and dumplings. They ate quietly at first. Then conversation filled the room. One man told Mei he had not heard a woman speak Chinese in months. Another asked where she came from. A third wanted to know whether she had rice. Sometimes. Today. No. He looked devastated. Tomorrow. Still no. Everyone laughed. The following evening, more railroad workers arrived. Then Irish laborers followed them. A Mexican freight driver tried the braised beef and asked Mei what she had used. Ginger. He nodded thoughtfully. Needs chili. No. Little chili. No. Very little. Mei pointed toward the door. The driver laughed so hard he ordered another bowl. His name was Mateo. His sister, Rosa Martinez, came in 2 days later looking for work. Rosa was a widow with experience cooking for freight crews. Mei couldn't afford another employee. Not yet. But business continued climbing. 3 weeks later, she hired Rosa for evening shifts. Rosa knew little about a wok. Mei taught her. Rosa knew far more about local dried peppers than Mei did. She taught Mei. A month after that, Anna Kowalski joined them. Anna had worked in a bakery and understood dough beautifully. The old saloon changed. The bar became a serving counter. Shelves once filled with liquor held flour, preserved vegetables, bowls, and jars. The broken piano remained in the corner because nobody had the energy to move it. Cowboys ate beside railroad workers. Freight drivers shared tables with merchants. Nobody considered this remarkable after a while. They were hungry. Mei fed them. That was enough. 3 months passed. Caleb arrived with a new rental contract. Mei read every line. The rent was higher. Much higher. She smiled. Caleb looked suspicious. You're happy? Yes. About paying me more? Yes. Should I be worried? Mei signed. Means business works. He took the contract. You're the only tenant I've ever had who celebrates a rent increase. You gave cheap rent because I was poor. I gave cheap rent because the building was empty. Both. Caleb couldn't argue. She paid the first month in full. Something changed between them that day. The balance became clearer. Caleb had given her access to a neglected kitchen. Mei had turned it into something profitable. Neither could claim the other's success. They were partners in circumstance, not obligation. Their friendship grew in the spaces between business. Caleb occasionally stayed for dinner. Mei sometimes sent food to his ranch hands. He fixed a chair. She charged him for noodles. He complained. She charged him anyway. It was, Mei decided, a comfortable arrangement. Then winter came hard. The first blizzard closed the railroad for 3 days. The second buried sections of track. The third stopped almost everything. Silver Creek went nearly 2 weeks without a regular supply train. The general store began rationing flour and coal. Fresh vegetables disappeared. Coffee became expensive enough to inspire arguments. The hotel reduced portions. Mei stood inside her pantry with Caleb one morning. How bad? He asked. She counted sacks. Dried noodles. Some flour. Cabbage. Carrots. Mushrooms. Beef. Bones. Ginger. Small rice. How long? If people eat normally? Yeah. 4 days. Caleb exhaled. And if they eat your way? Mei looked at the shelves again. 12. He stared at her. How? People waste. That afternoon, Mei changed everything. Large portions of beef disappeared from the menu. Bones went into stockpots. Meat was sliced thin and distributed through noodles and dumplings. Vegetable scraps flavored broth. Pickled cabbage appeared with nearly every meal. Rice was reserved for people who needed soft food. Flour became dough that could stretch smaller amounts of meat into filling meals. A merchant objected when his bowl arrived. "I paid for beef." "There is beef." "Where?" Mei pointed. "Under noodles." The man searched. "This much? You want tomorrow beef too?" He looked at her. Mei folded her arms. He ate the noodles. Caleb turned away so the merchant wouldn't see him smiling. By the 6th day, Mei's restaurant had become something larger than a business. Families came because their own fuel was running low. Railroad men brought potatoes. A rancher donated onions. Someone arrived with beans. Caleb's men hauled firewood. Workers cleared snow from the entrance. Mei accepted supplies but refused chaos. Everything entering the pantry was counted. Meals were portioned according to need and available stock. People performing heavy outdoor labor received larger servings. Older residents were given softer foods. Nothing left the pantry without Mei or Rosa knowing. One afternoon Caleb watched Mei inspect a pot of broth. "Your mother teach you this?" Mei glanced at him. "What?" "How to feed half a town on 3 cabbages." Mei smiled faintly. "Mother taught me poor family cannot waste." She stirred the broth. "When little food, you don't ask how to make one plate look rich. What do you ask? How everyone eats tomorrow." Caleb looked around. Men from different countries sat shoulder to shoulder. A ranch hand who once refused noodles was teaching another man how to hold chopsticks badly. Rosa argued with Mateo about taking too much bread. Anna rolled dough at the back table. Nobody called the building Morgan's Saloon anymore. Somewhere during the storm, it had become Mei's kitchen. The railroad reopened on the 11th day. Silver Creek still had food. Not much. Enough. When the first supply train arrived, half the town cheered. Mei was asleep in a chair beside the stove and missed it. Spring should have made everything easier. Instead, Caleb walked into the kitchen one morning carrying a letter. He looked different. "What happened?" Mei asked. "Problem. Small." "No." He explained. His late brother had borrowed money years earlier and used the saloon property as collateral. Caleb had believed the matter settled with the estate. It wasn't. A creditor in Cheyenne had produced documentation of the remaining debt. If Caleb couldn't resolve it, the building could be sold. Mei stared at him. "When?" "Maybe 60 days. You knew before today." 3 days. "Why tell me now?" "I was trying to handle it." "No." Caleb frowned. "No. Building is my business. It's technically my building." Mei gave him a look. He corrected himself. "The building contains your business." "Better. I don't want you paying my brother's debt." "I will not." "Good. I buy building." Caleb stared. "You can't." "Not today." She walked to her account book. The restaurant had recently received an offer from the railroad company to provide scheduled meals for crews traveling through Silver Creek. Mei had hesitated because it required longer-term certainty. Now the contract became leverage. She spent most of that night working. The next morning she placed several pages in front of Caleb. Lease with purchase. He read. Part of her monthly payment would go toward an agreed purchase price. The railroad meal contract provided predictable income. Caleb would receive enough upfront money to settle the immediate claim while preserving his ranch finances. Over time, Mei would acquire the building outright. Caleb read the agreement twice. "You came up with this last night?" "Yes." "Did you sleep?" "No. That's concerning. Sign. He laughed despite himself. Then his expression became serious. You sure? Mei looked around the kitchen. Rosa was chopping vegetables. Anna was mixing dough. Steam rose from the stove. Customers would begin arriving within an hour. I crossed ocean with recipes and no stove, Mei said. Now I have business. She touched the contract. I protect business. Caleb signed. Several months later, Caleb found Mei alone after closing. Her mother's recipe book lay open on the table. One page had caught a drop of broth. Mei was carefully blotting it with cloth. Caleb sat across from her. What's that recipe? She hesitated. Soup. That narrows it down. Mei translated parts of the page. Her mother had made the soup whenever Mei became ill as a child. Ginger. Pork bones. Mushrooms. Greens Caleb had never heard of. Other ingredients Mei hadn't seen since leaving California. You ever make it here? No. Why? Cannot. He looked toward the pantry. Because you don't have the ingredients? Mei nodded. Caleb noticed something in her expression. What's wrong? She closed the book halfway. Nothing. You're bad at lying. Mei stared at the cover. Food here is different. Yeah. Mother's recipes are different. Caleb waited. I change everything. She looked toward the stove. Beef instead of pork. Local flour. Different vegetables. Different water. Sometimes. I think. She stopped. Caleb said nothing. That made it easier to continue. I came with her recipes because I wanted to keep something. Of her? Of home. She looked around the former saloon. But every recipe changes. Caleb leaned back. Did your mother teach you to cook? Yes. Did she teach you to copy a book? Mei looked at him sharply. No. What did she teach you? Mei thought. Many answers came to mind. How to cut. How to season. How to tell whether dough needed water by touch. How to save fuel. How to stretch meat. How to feed children first when food was scarce. Finally she said, feed people with what we have. Caleb nodded toward the dining room. Seems like you're following the recipe. Mei looked at him. For once, Caleb didn't smile. He understood. Not the food. The fear beneath it. Mei reached across the table and placed her hand briefly over his. Thank you. He turned his palm upward. Her hand remained there. Neither moved for several seconds. Then Mei withdrew it and closed the recipe book. It was the closest they had come to speaking about what was growing between them. Neither rushed it. By spring of 1891, Mei's kitchen served breakfast and dinner 6 days a week. Railroad contracts provided steady income. Rosa supervised evening service. Anna managed most of the dough work. Mei hired 2 additional workers. The final payment on the building came due on a bright April morning. Caleb arrived carrying the deed. He placed it on the counter. This one's yours. Mei didn't touch it immediately. She looked around. The old bar remained, though its surface now held bowls instead of whiskey bottles. The cracked mirror still hung on the wall. The piano remained hopeless. Tables filled the room. The kitchen beyond them was loud and alive. Mei signed. Caleb began removing the old saloon mirror. Leave it. He stopped. Seriously? Yes. Why? Mei looked into the glass. In its imperfect reflection, Rosa worked over the stove. Anna carried bread. 2 railroad men sat beside ranch hands. A freight driver entered and waved. Remember what room was, Mei said. Caleb looked at the reflection too. And what it became. Yes. He left the mirror. That evening, after everyone else had gone, Mei prepared 2 bowls of noodles. She and Caleb sat at the first table he had repaired for her. For several minutes they ate without talking. Then Caleb said, "You don't need me anymore." Mei looked up. "I never needed you." His expression changed. She almost laughed. "I mean, I know what you mean." "No. You look offended." "A little." Mei put down her chopsticks. "I needed kitchen." "You had kitchen." "Romantic." "Be quiet." Caleb smiled. Mei continued. "You gave me place to begin. But I chose business." "Yeah." "I chose contract." "Yeah." "I chose stay." His smile faded. Mei stood. She walked around the table. "I chose to work with you." Caleb looked up at her. "That's better than needing me." "Much." Mei extended her hand. "And I still choose you." Caleb stood. He took her hand carefully. "No rescue. No debt. No obligation. A choice." Mei stepped closer. For once, there was nothing to negotiate. 2 years later, the railroad brought another young immigrant into Silver Creek. His name was Jian. He was 19 and carried a basket containing several things his uncle had sent from San Francisco's Chinatown. Dried mushrooms. Preserved vegetables. A small package of tea. He entered Mei's restaurant near closing. Mei heard his accent before she saw his face. He asked in Chinese whether she sold anything cheap. "How much do you have?" Jian placed several coins on the counter. "Not enough for a full meal." Mei looked at the basket. "What is that?" "My uncle sends supplies." She lifted the cloth. Then stopped. "The mushrooms." She knew them. "The preserved greens too." Mei turned toward the kitchen. Her mother's recipe book remained in the same drawer beside the stove. She opened it. Found the stained page. For several seconds, Silver Creek disappeared. She remembered her mother's hands. A small kitchen. Steam on a window. The smell of ginger. A bowl placed in front of a sick little girl. Mei looked at Jian. "I buy some ingredients from you." His eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I know." She named a fair price. Then pointed toward a table. "And you eat." That night, after the restaurant closed, Mei cooked the soup for the first time. In Wyoming. Not perfectly. The pork was replaced by beef bones. The greens were different. The water tasted different. Even the ginger seemed sharper than she remembered. Caleb entered while she was tasting the broth. He removed his hat. "New recipe?" Mei shook her head. "Very old." He understood enough not to ask more. She poured a bowl. Tasted again. Her eyes closed. It wasn't her mother's soup. Not exactly. For years, Mei might have considered that a failure. Now she didn't. Jian sat nearby finishing his dinner. He watched her. "Is it the same as China?" he asked. Mei thought carefully. "No." The young man looked disappointed. Mei smiled. "But it remembers China." She looked around the room. Rosa was preparing tomorrow's supplies. Anna had left fresh dough covered near the work table. Outside, Caleb unloaded flour from a wagon. At one table, a ranch hand demonstrated an impressively terrible technique with chopsticks while 2 Chinese railroad workers laughed at him. A child dropped a dumpling and tried to retrieve it before his mother noticed. The cracked saloon mirror reflected all of it. Mei closed her mother's notebook. When she first arrived in Silver Creek, she believed preserving those recipes meant protecting them from change. Keeping every ingredient, every method, every flavor exactly as she remembered. But her mother had never taught her that. Her mother had taught her something simpler. Feed people with what you have. So Mei had. She had crossed an ocean with a suitcase, a wok, and recipes from a kitchen she would never see again. Caleb had opened the door to an empty saloon. That was his gift. What came afterward was hers. Mei had built the kitchen. She had adapted the food. She had hired the workers. She had negotiated the contracts. She had fed Silver Creek through a winter when supplies nearly disappeared. She had bought the building with money earned one bowl at a time. And somewhere along the way, the recipes stopped being relics of a life she had lost. They became foundations for a life still being made. Caleb came through the doorway carrying the final sack of flour. You planning on feeding anybody tomorrow? Mei looked at the mountain of supplies. Unfortunately. Good. I'm hungry. You are always hungry. That's why your business works. Mei laughed. Caleb set down the sack and approached her. She poured another bowl of soup. For you. He tasted it. Mei watched his expression. Caleb nodded slowly. Good. Only good. Very good. You have terrible vocabulary. I've been told. Mei leaned against the counter. Caleb looked toward the old recipe book. Your mother's. Yes. He nodded toward the bowl. Think she'd approve? Years earlier, that question might have hurt. Now Mei looked at the crowded kitchen, the shelves of Wyoming ingredients, the worn wok she had carried from California, and the old saloon mirror reflecting the home she had created. I think, she said quietly, she would understand. Outside, a train whistle carried across Silver Creek. Another train arriving from the west. More travelers. More workers. Perhaps another person stepping onto the platform with little money and something valuable hidden inside a suitcase. Mei knew that journey. She knew what it meant to arrive somewhere that had no place prepared for you. Sometimes there wasn't a place. Sometimes you had to make one. She opened her mother's notebook again. Caleb pulled a chair beside the counter. Steam rose from the soup between them. And in a former Wyoming saloon where whiskey bottles had once lined the walls, ginger, beef broth, fresh dough, and wood smoke filled the air. Mei turned the page. Then she began cooking again.